Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining in. Today we'll be talking about how to get started with 3D printed fashion in your classes. My name is Lynette, and I'll be guiding you through this webinar that will be 45 minutes long. Let me just quickly share with you my presentation. We can start. Perfect. So as I said before, we are going to talk about getting started with 3D printed fashion in the classroom. You can always ask questions during this webinar. There will be a section at the end where I'll be answering all of that. And I just wanted to quickly show you how you can ask a question. So there is this icon with a triangle and circle and a square. And when you click on the icon, you can find the Q&A section, and then at the bottom you can click on Ask Questions. So during the webinar, you can ask questions anytime, and then at the end I will tell you how you can. At the end I will tell you and remind you again how you can ask the questions, but also I'll tell you the answers to your questions. So feel free to ask them anytime. So I'll just show you again. It's this sign, then you click on Q&A, and then you click on Ask Questions. Let me just quickly introduce myself. As I said before, my name is Lynette Manuel, and my trajectory to education is a little bit, I would say, unusual. I have started my career at IBM when I worked in the department that was helping to spread awareness about AI technologies before the AI was so popular as it is now. And it was exactly at IBM where I figured out how wonderful can the technologies be. I fall in love with modern technologies, and I discovered that there is this beauty in using technologies for good, because until then I was just using technologies as a means to entertain myself or finish my work. But we were in a department that was closely collaborating with innovative teams that could do, for example, AI to early detect breast cancer, or develop the Watson assistant and the assistants that we are now using now, to the chat assistants that we are using right now. So often. And I saw how it can be implemented in a real world, and how it can really impact, if used mindfully and ethically, then it can really help us to build better societies. So I was thinking at that time, how is it possible that I'm learning it at that day or so late? Because I figured it out when I was at universities, because it was my first job. And I thought, okay, that's actually one of the things that could be will be wonderful to show to students and help them find out how these technologies could be used in more fun setup. And when my former business partner reached out to me if I wanted to join the project to help students to spread the awareness about modern technologies and show them how they can use IT and different technologies, but also implement them in the classes, I didn't hesitate and I jumped right in. I became the Chief Learning Experience Officer, which is a very, very fancy way how to name someone who was in charge of curriculums, and I was also teaching. So we were teaching AI, we were teaching, but also like basic programming and computer science skills. But also 3D printing and the creative aspects of the technologies as well. After that, a few years went by, and COVID hit. And when COVID hit, I actually realized that life is very short and that you shouldn't be postponing your dreams. And I always wanted to do fashion. So I signed up for Fashion Institute of Design in Prague. And I did my course there on fashion. I got really wonderful feedback. And I was thinking, okay, I always wanted to follow fashion. but I also built this career in tech. How can I merge it together? And then I went to Amsterdam because I found out that there is a wonderful study that you can follow at the textile science and engineering degree. It's a postgraduate degree, and you can do it from different places. And I signed up for this course, and I decided it would be wonderful. I decided it would be a wonderful experience, and then it was a very, 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 very well done course, and I was really, really happy to be joining this course because it got me exactly what I wanted. We were learning how to use technologies to in the fashion industry. So we were using 3D printers to 3D print textiles. We were using also the electronics to like enhance fashion clothing, but we also went to more like in biochemistry and ways how to, for example, use bacteria to dye fabric, or how to use natural resources to produce natural dyes, or to create bioplastics. And I really enjoyed it all. And one of the things that I really, really liked and realized when I was there is that most of the audience and most of the students were female. Like 98% of the students who joined were specifically women. And I was thinking again, I asked myself this question, like why are we learning about this much sooner? Because it's such a fun way how to start learning about technologies, because most of the women, apart from me, I came with IT background, but most of them were in the creative fields for a very long time, and they were exploring ways how to integrate technologies in their work. And at the beginning, most of them were quite skeptical about the technology, and some even afraid. And at the end, they really fell in love with it. And I thought to myself, wow, that would be wonderful if we have this type of learning, but just much earlier, much sooner, for girls who could be maybe inspired to join STEM. So that inspired me to built Makeful. And Makeful, I'm not alone. I also have a wonderful partner, Barbara Rakowska, that she has a degree in design, and she has done the same course as I did, but whilst I focus more on the technology side and on the 3D printing and using technologies like the electronics in textiles and wearables, Barbara is much more focused on the biomaterial aspects and the sustainability part. So she has created this wonderful material archive with growing roots, which are ways how you can actually grow different type of materials, either using mushrooms or fungi, or using different roots of different grasses to create materials. And together, we are on a mission to make STEAM learning more inclusive and bring the technologies of the future into the classroom so we can learn about them today. And the way we want to do it is because we both really, I was a teacher, and I still am a teacher. I'm teaching, but we both really like cherish and respect teachers, and we think that one of the ways how we can really help make this mission fast forward is to help teachers around the globe to adopt fashion tech for their classes as an inspiration. So what is 3D printed fashion? How does it actually look like? So let me show you a few pictures and examples of students that have in our classes what they have produced. And by 3D printed fashion, you can really imagine anything from that has been produced by a 3D printer. So it can be a tank top, it can be underwear, it can be corset, it can be shoes, it can be accessories, it can be really any garment or any piece of fashion that can be created using 3D printed technology. And in this webinar, we will be focusing mostly on the FDM 3D printing, because that's the 3D printing that's the most common, the most used. That's the printing that uses the filament, the material to push the filament, push and create the objects layers by layers. But there are also, like, the 3D printed technology in fashion is quite popular, and it's getting even more and more popular. And you can also use, for example, SLA to produce beautiful accessories, and SLS to 3D print fashion in the entire piece. But since we are all teachers, and I know that we are working on budget, and buying SLA 3D printers or even SLS 3D printer would be quite not possible, we focused in our curriculum mostly on FDM and 3D printers that are the ones that are most used. When it comes to 3D printed fashion, there is also, I wanted to show you also this project that Lucy has created. You don't have to be only printing new pieces of fashion. Lucy has used 3D printing to give second life to a old purse that she thrifted for €2. And she was very keen on creating like some upcycling project. So she decided to design this beautiful handle, and she bought the 3D printed the bag that wasn't 3D printed. She bought the bag in a store for €2 and just added the handle, so the old bag looks now like a modern luxurious bag. And she wanted to demonstrate that you can actually give with 3D printing second life to things that wouldn't be maybe used anymore. And on the other side, we have Isabella that has designed 3D printed tennis wear. And this part has been completely 3D printed, like there is no fabric. But I will talk about it in more details in a second. So how do we create this 3D printed fashion? Well, there are many methods how you can create 3D printed fashion. You can use the chainmail method, but with using rigid filaments. But the downfall of the method is that it's actually not quite something that you would like to be sitting in. Because it's, just imagine if you had like chainmail 3D printed skirt that is from rigid filaments, that it wouldn't be quite comfortable to sit maybe on a chair in it. So we are trying to use a method that lets us really produce textiles, and that method is called infill method. And what it actually means is that we are working with the infill structures that are inside of that are already produced in our slicers. And we are using different infill structures to produce textile-like 3D printed fabric. What it actually means is that you remove the top and the bottom layer, and then you are left with the middle part. And the middle part then is used to create these structures that looks like textile. And then you print one of the parts very, very thin, so it then works like textile. It needs to be made from flexible filaments, and when you make it from flexible filaments, then it really looks and resembles woven or knitted fabric. Let me show you different techniques that you can do with 3D printed fashion, and a little bit more for those who might have in their schools open spaces, maker spaces, or access to a laser. So the first that I talked about was the 3D printed fabrics with flexible filaments, and I've already told you a little bit about it, and that's producing fabric using the flexible filaments with the infill method, like removing the top and bottom layer in order for us to produce the textiles. And it really is an interesting method to produce textiles, because you can really reproduce different types of textiles and different types of flexibility and different types of structures, and then that can have a different feel. So you're not limited to have just one type of textile, but you can really vary depending on the settings that you use. Then another method is sublime printing, and sublime printing is a method that was developed by Brigitte Koch. She's a researcher and designer, and she was thinking about like the limitations that we have with filaments, because usually when we print, then the colors of the textile was limited only to the color of the filament, but from the aspect from the fashion, we want to work with different textile patterns. We sometimes want to use floral patterns, or we want to give like really colorful, bright colors, but keep it still thin. And she thought about like the sublimation method that you can use in traditional textile fields to print different print on top of a t-shirt. And since the sublimation method is works on heat, she thought that with 3D printing we are also using heat. So would it be possible to sublimate print some pattern on 3D printed textiles using sublimation papers? And she researched it and figured that it is very much well possible. And now we are able to produce these wonderful prints using sublimate printing method. And we only need to have like a transparent or white filament. So we are no longer limited to the colors of the producers of this flexible filament. Another method that is quite very, I would say, inclusive and welcoming for beginners is hand 3D printing. Hand 3D printing is a wonderful method how to start with 3D printed fashion, specifically with students who might have a little bit of reservations with the machines, or who would like to start like with an easy start. And you can use a 3D pen to design also wonderful textiles, wonderful lace, but also to produce like different ornaments and decorations on top of the textile that you will be 3D printing. So for example, if you want to do embroidery or beading or any 3D effect on the ornaments, then hand 3D printing and printing with a 3D pen is a wonderful opportunity to do so. Another technique that I have to mention is modular fashion. Modular fashion is in general now very popular in fashion because it's a aspect or a way to design fashion so it doesn't need any glue or stitching to be put together. It also thinks about sustainability and how to be cut it from the fabric so it leaves almost zero waste. But we figured that modular fashion works even better with 3D printed fashion. The reason for it is because the material that we are printing with the 3D printed fashion usually has a little bit of structure, and the structure makes the 3D printed fabric a little bit less prone to deattach. So the connections, the interlocks that you create are stronger, so it even works better to keep the 3D printed garments together and not fall apart. But another thing that is very wonderful about modular fashion and using it with 3D printing is that when we are laser cutting or cutting the parts, the modules from the fabric, we are always left with a little bit of waste. But when we are designing and printing, we can only design and print the specific modules that we need, leaving us with almost zero waste, which is also a nice way how to promote and work on sustainability aspect. And also when we are done with the part. So for example, let's imagine that we have 3D printed modular trousers. Then we can deassemble the trousers and build, for example, a t-shirt. And when we are done with the t-shirt, then we can deassemble the t-shirt and make a shirt. And when we don't want a shirt anymore, we can create a tank top, we can create a bag. So you can always like deassemble the parts and create something new from the modules that you already have. Which is also a nice way how to not create any additional waste. Here is an example of a modular t-shirt that Bara has designed and that we wore for a conference. And these pieces, this t-shirt is not connected, it's just solely made, it's not t-shirt, I would say just top. This top is solely made from modular parts that have been interlocked together, and they can be deassembled again and used for other purpose. And it's not, as I said, we're not using any glue, we're not using anything to put the top together. And you can also use modular fashion to create these wonderful, unique 3D designs. For example, we had a type that looked like a flower. When we talk about like how do we construct the garment, because most of us don't have at home a big 3D printer, and we usually have a question like how do we use the small 3D printers that we have to produce the garment. One of the ways is modular fashion. And create modules, but you can also just separate your patterns into parts and then connect the pieces together using either a 3D pen, or you can use iron, solder, or any heat to connect the pieces together. You can also work with 3D printed textiles as if it was traditional textiles, so you can use a sewing machine to sew it together, or you can also hand stitch the parts yourself with your hands. The additional pieces that I wanted to talk about is the modules that you can use using the laser, because before until this part, then the techniques are usually used for 3D printed fashion and are the ones that we usually promote to be used in the classes. But in addition to that, maybe some of you might be having maker spaces and also or access to a laser. And we usually say that if you're creating fashion, you might need a mannequin or at least some type of mannequin to try and see how the prints that you have created actually look together, and if there are some adjustments, and it really helps to enhance the experience from the classes. And either you can buy a mannequin or you can create your own. And the wonderful thing about creating own mannequins, or for students, but also for you, is that they can really create a mannequin that works and resembles their bodies or the body of the person that they will be producing the piece for. By piece, I mean the garment. And they can use another very interesting softwares to do so, and it's quite easy. You only need few softwares to actually be able to create a model of the body. There is also a mobile app called V3D Look, which can using two pictures. So you just use the app, open the app, and you make two pictures, and it takes virtually, digitally, your measurements. So it measures your size, the size of your body, and then you get all of the measurements back as a number. And then with the open source software Make Human, you can design your body in a virtual space, so you can create this digital avatar. Then you just cut the torso in any digital software that can handle like big objects, and then you use Slicer for 360 to produce files that can be then cut with using laser. And then you have this all of these parts. We were using polyurethane because we wanted to create mannequins that can be pinned, that you can pin in. So they are not hard, they're squishy, fluffy, and you just glue them together. And one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this is because when we were doing that with our students, most of the students really they couldn't believe their eyes how small the mannequins were, even though they were doing the measurements, even though they were taking the measurements of themselves, and they were really doubting the app, because they were just really doubtful and not understanding how small can be the mannequins, and they were measuring themselves. And I also did the same thing, to be honest. When I laser cutted mine, I couldn't believe it. And we all realized how we suffer with body dysmorphia, and how actually like not real, how we don't see ourselves the way we actually are. And it was really nice to see on the students like the relief and seeing their body in the real representation and how small they actually are. And we also talked about it, like about body image and body issues. So at the end, everyone was like, "Oh, it's okay. I can keep healthy, but I can eat." So it was a very nice experience also to see the students with their smiles on, and understanding that their body image shifted from that day, and they saw themselves much more realistically than they did have prior to this experience. Let me show you some 3D printed fashion projects that the students have created. The first one that I want to show you is a project of Hannah. Hanka decided that she would like to create a 3D printed corset, and she wanted to use 3D printing to create materials and structures that are not usually simple to do with textiles. So she decided to design this bony corset, and this entire piece was 3D printed. Hanka had no prior experiences before. She has never used a 3D printer. She has never used any 3D printing software. She has never done 3D modeling, and at the end, she was able to produce this beautiful final piece, and only using Tinkercad. So the software that is for free, free 3D modeling software that you can access easily. The piece, it took a little bit of time to 3D print this piece. So she was printing it for 3 days, and then she needed one more day to assemble it together. She wanted to hand stitch it because she wanted to look very clean, and since she was using transparent filament, she also wanted to not have any seams visible. And then she just used, but I don't have a picture in here. She used filaments to to connect the corset, and also at the back she used modular fashion to connect the skirt. So the little skirt that she has here in the bottom was designed with modular pieces. To produce this project, Hanka used about 600 grams of filament, which is like about 70% of the spool. Then Isabel is the project that I've showed you already. Isabel was very into tennis and sportswear, so she really wanted to recreate like tennis wear using the sublimation method that she has fell in love with. And she wanted to create like this colorful printed shirt with the mini skirt. And we have taken a picture of the project before it was finished, but she also have 3D printed buttons that she then hand stitched on top of the shirt. And also she added a small pocket. To print this piece, it was much faster. She printed it in a day. Of course, like it took longer because she was experimenting and figuring out the settings, but the actual number, the raw number that it took to 3D print this part, the 3D print this project was 1 day, and she used about 120 grams of filament to produce this piece. And of course, we weren't printing during day and night. One of the great things about like 3D printed fashion is that you can just leave the piece, even if the piece takes 8 hours, which Isabel's didn't, Hanka's did, but Isabel's pieces were quite faster. But even if you have a piece that takes 8 hours to print, then you can just leave the printer to print the piece and then come back in the morning and the piece is done. Last project that I want to show you is project of Emma. And Emma wanted to create a piece that was a little bit more like a costume. She went more to the like artistic creative side. So she has designed these hard structures, these bones, and she also used flexible filament to print on textiles, which has created this wonderful 3D printed 3D objects and 3D designs using a textile. And she has connected all of the pieces using transparent filament and 3D pen. So nothing in here is glued, nothing in here is connected or sewn. She only used the 3D pen to put the entire piece together. And for this project, Emma has used about 250 grams of filament in total, about 60 grams of the flexible one, and the rest of it was for the hard part of the part of the bones. Emma and Isabel, both of them never had experience with 3D printing. They really started like a tabula rasa. They had no experience with using the machines, and at the end they were able to produce these pieces almost without my help. Like there was only a little bit of things that they were asking me about, but after the program they were able to produce the pieces themselves. You don't have to start in your classroom with big projects, so you don't have to like start printing with the hard projects. Like you don't have to be printing a corset, and maybe you won't have even time to do so. But you can also start with small projects, and that's the thing that we always recommend teachers to do, is to start with small little projects, such as, for example, 3D printed tank top or 3D printed lace, or even something that can be useful like a 3D printed scrunchie or a bow tie. And you can even start with just designing different patterns on 3D printed textiles using a 3D pen. So using hand 3D printing just to create interesting patterns on textiles. You might be thinking, okay, I would like to do that, but what do I need? What kind of softwares do I need? What kind of equipment do I need? So let me answer this question, where when we look at the softwares, I have divided the softwares into two parts. The first row are the softwares that we use that are needed for the 3D printed fashion. And then the bottom row is the softwares that I've talked about that are mostly, if you are skilled and hands, and if you have budget, then you can use also the software. So let's look at the first row. You will definitely need a slicer. We have added here Prusa slicer, but you can use any slicer that you are used to in combination with your 3D printer. You can use Tinkercad as one of the 3D modeling softwares, and since Tinkercad is very easy, you design by having objects, you might have used Tinkercad already. And it's for free, and it's a web app, so you don't have to install anything on your computers, and you can create you can have beautiful folders in there with structures, and even have your classroom, your entire classroom in Tinkercad. So you can use this software to produce and create designer pieces. Canva, we use Canva to create, because we tell the students to document their work, and for that we use Canva to either adjust and create a little bit more nicer designs, but also for the documentation of their work. They can design a web page without using coding. Of course, if you have like coding classes in your school, then you can pair a partner with a teacher that does coding, or if it's you, then you can let the students in their coding classes design their web page using HTML or any other language that you're using to produce websites. Melanode is a software that lets you create beautiful fashion mood boards, but also you can also have a section in there where you can create like project management and really design like step by step what needs to be done in order to produce the pieces, because of course it's important to be able to work with the design part and the creative aspect, but also it's also important to know how to manage, and specifically in school settings when you don't have like unlimited time to work on your project, then it's good to be able to also plan the project and divide the steps that you need to do, which Milanote also is a good software to help with. And we also teach in the program in our accelerator that we have for teachers how to use Milanote and how to do the entire like project management planning with 3D printed fashion, because at the beginning, if you haven't done it a lot, it's quite hard to be able to say, oh, will you be able to print this tank top on time if you have like only 4 hours and our hours are, I don't know, 90 minutes long. So we also teach you, so we can all teach the students how they can think about their projects in regards with the limited time that they have. Then Adobe Firefly to design interesting AI-generated patterns, and of course, like we teach students how to use AI, but we are mindful of the ethical aspect of it. So we also teach the students or the teachers that join our accelerator how to explain to the students how to use the AI-generated images ethically. If we go at the bottom row, Make Human is the software that I showed to you, where you can create the digital avatars for the mannequins. Rhino 3D is a more complex designing software where you can, for example, create parametric design, which is a design that can be modified by using different values. So if you wanted to create different structures, I will show you in a second with the filaments, then Rhino would be a good software to start with. Then Slicer for Fusion 360, which is the software that creates from object files to be used for the laser cutting. V3D Look, that's the mobile app to take the measurements and using two photos, and then Adobe Illustrator for another additional graphic design, or you can design patterns in there. When it comes to the tools, then of course you would need a 3D printer, and it can be a normal traditional 3D printer, but it just needs to be a 3D printer that is able to print from flexible filaments. If you're not sure if your 3D printer can print from flexible filaments, you can send me an email or send us an email and we can have a look at it. We have many teachers asking us questions about their 3D printers, and we are always happy to help. Then we would recommend a sublimation printer or sublimation paper. So you can either outsource it and have a company send you already prepared sublimation papers, but you can cut costs by buying sublimation printer, which is a traditional ink printer that just has can be filled with sublimation ink. And instead of normal paper, you either use vellum or transfer paper and sublimation paper. And it really cuts cost because it's quite pricey to have the sublimation paper sent to you. And the entire sublimation printer with the ink and with the paper costs about $300. And you will be, with the set that comes to you, you can use it for 2 years without no need to buy nor ink. Maybe you will need to buy a little bit more of paper depending on how much subli printing you will be doing in the classes. Then a 3D pen, we use a Sunlu 3D pen because they are the best for the flexible filaments and they work with flexible filaments very, very easily. Iron solder, if you want to be able to connect the pieces with the soldering, with the iron solder, but it's not necessary. Some clippers, fabrics, and traditional like paper equipment and fashion equipment, and of course filament. And when it comes to filament, we use flexible filaments, and we always recommend for teachers to be using the flexible filaments of shore hardness between 95A and 70A. And the reason for it is that these filaments, of course, like the more flexible the filament is, the nicer outcome you have of the fabric, of the 3D printed fabric. So it's very soft. Like the softer is the filament, the softer will be the outcome. But at the beginning, if you've never 3D printed and if your students never 3D printed, we always say that it's easier to start with the more rigid filaments that are not so soft, because it's easier to 3D print with filaments that are as rigid. So we start with this 95 and then we go back up to 70. There is also a filament that is like 60 with the flexibility of 60A or shore hardness of 60A, but that is quite really stretchy filament and it requires a little bit of skill to print it. So I would say start with the rigid filaments, and then when you feel comfortable, you can always go back to the more flexible ones. And let me show you, I'll stop presenting and I'll show you how the filaments, what is the difference between the flexibility. So I have here 95A filament. So this is the 95A filament. If you haven't ever seen any filaments, then you can see that this is very like bandy, and it's quite flexible, but I have to apply a little bit of strength to stretch the filament. So it's a little bit, I have to apply a little bit of force to be able to stretch the filament. If I show you the 82A, and the lower is the number, the more flexible it is. So the 85A is this filament. So it takes a little bit of strength to prolong the filament, but you can see that it actually stretches a bit. And this one is the one that we usually use the most in our courses, in our classes, so the 85A. If I show you the 70 is quite, this is the transparent one, and it is quite flexible. So I can really like stretch it. It's really stretchy. And then the 60, which is really flexible, then it looks like this. And you can, oh, that's not the 60. This is the hard one. Where do I have the 60? Here. Yeah. So this is the 60. Here you can stretch it. You can see that it's like really flexible. I can like even be bouncing with it and it wouldn't break. But it's quite, as I said, it's quite difficult to print from it. So I wouldn't start with the 60, even though printing with the 60 is beautiful fabric. And then I would recommend you to start with filaments that are a little bit more rigid. Let me go back to the presentation so I can just finish with the materials. Apart from the flexibility, one of the wonderful things that you can also do to enhance your classes is to use filaments that have special properties. So you can use for example, air purifying filament and then say to your students to design a jacket or that would be air purifying, and to think about it from the aspect also from the social impact that it can have on different regions. Or you can use the Technica filament that is infused with citronella, which is natural repellent of mosquitoes. So you can say to the students, okay, imagine a region where they suffer with a lot of mosquitoes that transmit a lot of diseases, and just imagine what would you design with using this filament that could help in these regions. Or you can, for example, for some costume design, use the glow-in-the-dark filament. And one of the filaments that we are now quite obsessed with is the color changing filament, which is the filament that changes colors based on heat. So depending on what temperature it is in a room, or if you touch the filament, or if you just drop a little bit of water on the filament, then it changes colors. And we are also adding this, we are also sending this filament in our fashion tech kits. So you can also explore the filament because it's very much fun, and I guarantee you that your students will love it. Our students are really in love with that. I've talked about parametric design, and this is an example of parametric design. So we can create, for example, these structures using parametric design, and you don't have to do it one by one, but you can use code or this parametric design in Grasshopper, in Rhino, to create these structures that then can be printed piece by piece and then connected in a final piece, a final garment. Let me tell you about the best 3D printers that you can use. Well, the best 3D printers are the ones, of course, like there's no, most of the 3D printers that can be used to print flexible filament will be enough for your 3D printed fashion endeavors. But there are some 3D printers that are better for printing, and some 3D printers that will make your life a little bit harder. So I would recommend you to use 3D printers that have the direct extrusion, not the Bowden. Even though I have, for example, started printing with Prusa MK3S, and it doesn't have a direct extrusion, it has the Bowden driver, Bowden extruder, and the Bowden extruder just makes it a little bit harder to print with flexible filaments, but it's not impossible. So I myself started with the MK3S, and I was quite satisfied until I figured that some printers are better for it. So you can start with a 3D printer that doesn't have a direct extruder, but if you do have access to a different 3D printer with the direct extruder, or if you have a 3D printer or you have budget for buying a 3D printer, and I will show you in a second how much that they are not as pricey, the 3D printers, then I would recommend you, just for you to have your life a little bit easier, to use the 3D printer with the direct extruder. So now we have in our lab Bamboo AI Mini A1 Mini Plus, and that's a 3D printer that works very well with the flexible filament and with the range that I've set to you. It's very cheap. It costs about 200 euros, which I believe is about $220 or $30. And it has a small bed. It's very fast and very quiet, and it's so easy for maintenance. So it's not, and it's easy to set up. Like you can set up the 3D printer in 15 minutes or less. So it's a really good 3D printer to use in classrooms and with educators. We have teachers that have joined our accelerator program, and they are using Creality Ender. And that's the V3K3 version, and they're very satisfied with the 3D printer as well. And it's also one of the 3D printers that could be very easily assembled, and the Creality Ender costs about 300 euros. And then we have the Lego Neptune series 3D printer, and that's a very affordable 3D printer. It has a big bed, or the plate on which we are printing, and it costs around 100 and 150 euros. So it's a very, very cheap 3D printer but works very well, and also has like the direct extrusion and can be easily assembled and maintained. What are the benefits, or why should you be using the 3D printed fashion curriculum in your classes? Well, there are like 6 of them that are the main ones, and it also covers the topics that we wanted to make sure that are promoted in the learning experience for the students. So the first one is sustainability. So as I have talked about, like you can really touch into the sustainability aspect of fashion, because we all know that the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters of our environment from every aspect. And in this way, you can really let the students know how some parts of their garments that they are are using are produced and how they can really think about the sustainability aspect. But you can also show them different materials, because we also have a chapter that explains how can the 3D printed, how can be the flexible filament recycled, or even go even further, and we show specific filaments that are sustainable, so they can, like, some eco filaments, either they're using like some recycled filaments, but also filaments that can be easily they are easily biodegradable in our environment and don't create any pollution. The second part is creativity, of course. So the most, I would say, understandable part is that the students will have the opportunity to think about the garments that can be producing, and they will really explore the different ideas. And we also equip teachers with inspirational talks from fashion designers, award-winning fashion designers, that they explain their process and show their work, so even students can like explore their work and try to recreate something, or even go deep into themselves and think about ways how they can express themselves. But with that, also with all of the ideas comes problem solving, because they have a specific machine like a 3D printer, and they have the designing challenge and aspect, and they have to think about how the ideas that they have in their brains can be translated in the real world. They're applying tech, and they are not applying tech that is not useful for their future careers. Actually, on contrary, they're learning how to use 3D printing, how to employ 3D modeling, how to do graphic design, how to do project management, how documentation, but also how to present themselves. So all of these skills, even though not all of them will decide to be fashion designers, and we are not creating this module to have students as fashion designers, but they're learning skills that they can be easily transferable in any field that they will be they will choose to follow and focus on. Then there is the social impact aspect, using the filaments that promote social impact questions. So, for example, the air purifying filament, or how do we, for example, if we have a challenge of the areas with high air pollution, how can we use the glow-in-the-dark filament to design clothing, so we can help the people, or people who are in risk situations, to be to reflect on and have a reflective clothing for managing like the dangers of the air pollution or smoggy areas. And if they decide to be fashion designers, then we are also preparing them for the future, so they will be future ready, because even fashion, as other industries, are moving very much forward and are incorporating different and are more and more incorporating technology, so they will be ready for jumping into the industry and this field with the skills that are already being more and more necessary. As I've told you, we have 6 inspirational talks, and we'll be adding more inspirational talks at the end of this year from award-winning designers. And this is an inspirational talk when they talk about like their start of the career, but also their process and how they think about the fashion design and every single one of them thinks about it differently, but they are wonderful designers, and not only designers, some of them are researchers, and they are doing exceptional work, and I do believe that they are wonderful role models and examples for the students. So let me just tell you a little bit about a few of them. Leila Porges is an Israeli designer that creates 3D printed fashion using robotic arm, and she's coding the arm to produce the pieces. Brigitte Koch is the researcher and designer that has created the sublimation technique, but she also produced, for example, this 3D print. She has produced a lot of 3D printed fashion, but one of them that I like the most is the 3D printed kimono that was entirely 3D printed on a small 3D printer, but it took her ages to make the kimono, of course. And then Batul Rashdan, she's a designer and researcher that uses and produce her own biomaterials to 3D print fashion. So she also does a little bit of engineering on her 3D printer to adjust the 3D printer to be able to print from specific biomaterials that she creates herself. This is just an example of the fair that we have after the final fair, and we with the students, and the students were able to present their work to the public. They showed their examples, and of course some of them were more like neat and wanted to show just a little bit, but some of the students got super excited and produced a lot of examples and a lot of samples and wanted to show a lot of their work that they have created. Now, let me just briefly dive into the costs. If we think about, imagine that we have a class of students, and the size of the class is 20 students. And I always get the question if we need to have like 20 printers. So in order to be able to actually get the class running. But I always say that it's not necessary. For 20 students, 4 or 5 3D printers will be enough, and it really doesn't like it can be slowly implemented. And if you start with small projects and just make sure that every student has time to produce their pieces, then, and we also teach that in our acceleration program for teachers, how to divide the work and how to let the students produce samples and then produce their work without any hassle. So if we look at the cost of the 3D printers, if we go, I was like going with the economical aspect. So if we want to buy 5 3D printers, that's about $800. Then I recommend you to have also 5 3D pens, and that's about $150 when we talk about the Sunlu. And sometimes we can buy it, even if you buy it in bulk, you get a huge discount. Then 5 iron solders, that's about $50. Sublimation printer with the paper, with the ink, that's about $300. And together, all of these 4 items are the items that you will be buying only one time, and then you can use it for every of your classes. And that's something, that's the cost that won't be changing. That's that's the cost that you will just implement at the beginning. And then you of course have like additional costs for the sewing kits, clippers, duct tape, and all of the equipment of the class, which is about $300 per class per year. And then the flexible filaments for students. And I have been very, very generous. Like I have gave every student 800 grams, but in reality, you don't have to do so. You can cut the price into the third and even to half or even third of it, because I was thinking about like these Hanas that wanted to produce like big pieces with a lot of filament, but for the entire year, it should be perfectly fine to print and use flexible filaments and have like 200 grams per student, so it can be even like fourth of the price. But if we are being generous, then yearly it costs about $1,000 to which would be the year cost for a class for 20 students per the entire year. Now, just to close the session, I want to tell you that, of course, not every student will be a fashion designer, and that's not the goal of the program. I already told you that. But we know that it's fashion tech. It's a wonderful entry point to like ignite the spark to the STEM world, and then make it easier for you or the future teachers to build on the spark that is already there, and let the students be even more curious and deep dive into the world of STEM and science, engineering, or technology. So this is not the goal is not to produce fashion designers, and of course not everybody will be the fashion designer, but it's just a very nice way how to like introduce students to these, especially girls, to this field and help them discover it in a fun and relatable way. Thank you for your attention again. I will head to the questions section. If you want to ask any questions, then I'll just remind you, you can click on this icon and click on the Q&A section and ask question. And let me check if there are any questions. There are no questions. I'll give you a little bit of time if you want to ask any questions. It's still possible to do so. I will wait a second. Yes. Hi, Alison. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you so much for joining. Yes, there will be a recording. I will send it to you with all of the information and also with the listed 3D printers and filaments in the email. So you will get it and you can also use it and share it to others, definitely. Thank you, Rachel, for joining. I am very glad that you found it inspirational. I hope that you will be able to try that also with your classes. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Alison, for joining. So you're from Australia, which means that it's probably evening in there, right? Like I have an early morning here in Prague and you probably are on the other side. Oh, wonderful. So we have only like teachers from Australia, 5:30 p.m. That's 9 hours ahead. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for taking your time in the evening for joining the webinar. If there are no other questions, then I would close the webinar. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions, and if you share it with others, with other teachers, and they like it, then we will be only glad to have that happen. Thank you so much again. Oh, you are on school holidays. Wow. Thank you again. I take it, I really appreciate it because I know how precious are the holidays and the time that you have, like the break to recharge. So thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Wonderful. So if there are no questions left, then thank you again. And if you are still having a break, then enjoy your break. Have a wonderful time. Take as much time that you need to recharge for the last semester, because I do believe that it will be a last semester for you. Perfect. Thank you, Rachel, for joining the community. That's wonderful. We'll be adding more resources in there. So I think that this week we'll be adding the week 2 and 3, the resources. So you can also check that. And next week we'll be adding the 4 and 5. So you can always, like, the resources are for free. You can have a look at them, and if you like them, you can use it in your classes. I'm glad that you have joined. Perfect. Thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your break and the rest of your day. Bye-bye.